wait a minute.
That's just not accurate.
I have stood on the debate stage with Senator Sanders 8 prior times.
Excuse me.
I have said the
Secretary,
exact same
Senator,
thing.
please.
If we can raise it to 15 in New York or Los Angeles
Secretary,
or Seattle, let's do it.
If you're both screaming at each other, the viewers won't be able to hear either of you.
Okay.
So please don't talk over each other. Go ahead.
One of the interesting moments from last night is being called the Brooklyn Brawl. Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders battle over her judgment in his grasp of policy in a tense and at times personal debate just 5 days before the pivotal New York primary this coming Tuesday. Good evening, everyone. I'm Rick Blackwell, and in for Ed Berliner. It was their ninth debate. It certainly was the loudest, the most contentious. But was it the most important? Did anybody change their mind after last night's Clinton-Sanders war of words? Now, Hillary Clinton hopes to solidify her position as front-runner, while a strong showing or a victory for Bernie Sanders would bolster his campaign's argument that the party's so-called superdelegates should switch their allegiance to him. Meanwhile, on the Republican side, in a new Fox News poll, Donald Trump jumps to an 18-point lead over Ted Cruz, 45-27 in a new national poll. And to discuss this and more, let's welcome back to the Hardline CNBC contributor, New York Times bestselling author and judge on America's Greatest Makers, airing every Tuesday night at 9 p.m. on TBS, Carol Roth, and from Washington, D.C., columnist for the Daily Beast, Barrett Holmes Pitner. And let's start with those Republican numbers. Carol, 45%, highest poll number we've seen for Donald Trump. Bad news for Ted Cruz, who actually now finds himself in a battle for second. Check that out, 27-25 over John Kasich. What happened to Cruz's Wisconsin momentum, Carol?
I think it's what happened to Donald Trump. You can't keep a Trump down, and anytime he says something, whether it be foolish, outrageous, amazing, or otherwise, if it does have a negative effect, he has this amazing ability to spring back. So I think that what you're seeing here is not so much a loss of Cruz's momentum, but just that spring back of Donald Trump and his ability to do that. That being said, Donald Trump really does have to hit that 1237 number going into the convention, because if he doesn't, I think it's going to be a lot harder for him to keep that momentum within the party and within the convention as it is with him in the popular voting scenario.
You know, Barrett, I want to get to those delicate numbers in just a second, but let's stay with this polling. And I mean, Trump, he's never done better in polling with people who consider themselves very conservative. He stands at 50% with this demographic. He's at 54% with GOP voters who have a college degree. Is this really more about Trump's success, or is just Cruz having a difficult week?
I'd say more so that Cruz, throughout this campaign, has kind of painted himself as the opposite of Donald Trump and the New England or New York values versus Southern, Midwestern, Texas values. And, this is the New York primary, and someone who lives in New York versus someone who's painted themselves as being like an anti-New Yorker is clearly going to do a lot better. So I think that play has the biggest role to play in these poll numbers for Donald Trump.
Yeah, but Barrett, at the same time, these are national numbers. So, I mean, as well as he's doing in the Northeast, and we've got some big primary states coming up. We've got, obviously, New York coming up on Tuesday, and then the Fab Five on the 26th of the month, Connecticut, Delaware, Maryland, Pennsylvania, and Rhode Island. It's actually Kasich now that seems to have this momentum. Could actually Kasich overtake Cruz as the favorite of this anybody but Trump movement? I'm going to start with you, Barrett, and then Carol, I want you to weigh in on whether Kasich is really the true alternative. Barrett, go first.
I think Kasich has a lot of ground to cover to get past Cruz in the number 2 spot, but Kasich is there for a reason. He's the governor of Ohio. He's presenting himself as being the Republican who kind of appeals to moderates, and he's going to stay there just in that position. I think Ted Cruz, for the longest time, has presented himself as not being a New Englander, distanced himself from his Harvard education, and for these big primaries coming up, this is going to come back and get him. But that's been months in the making.
Carol, what happened to the Cruz campaign? Again, we talked about the Wisconsin momentum, but it does now appear that John Kasich could overtake Ted Cruz, especially in these mid-Atlantic states.
I mean, I think that there is a certain type of Republican voter that would love to see Kasich maintain that momentum. I just don't think that is really the case. And if you look at the strength of Trump if you look at the reason why Cruz was doing well and potentially will probably be more of a favorite when it comes to the convention, it's because they have this sort of outsider status with the American people, and they're looking for something different. And John Kasich does not present strength. He doesn't present an outsider position. And so I think that in terms of him somehow gaining national momentum and everyone going, yeah, we're really going to be super excited about Kasich, I think it's almost impossible to get super excited about Kasich. There's nothing about him that screams excitement. So I just don't think that that's likely to happen.
Barrett, let's talk about the delegate math. Carol brought it up. New York, 50% threshold is going to be so vital as far as gaining a lot of those delegates. Do you think right now, based on these latest numbers from Fox News, that it does appear that Donald Trump is well on his way to that magic number, 1238?
It's hard to say if he's well on his way to that. He's definitely the most likely candidate to get there. But I believe in all the other primaries, coming up, that the GOP is going to find a way to kind of inch away at that and give them some hope going into the convention. But Donald Trump definitely has a very large lead in New York, and that's going to be very beneficial for him.
You know, one of the key states coming up, obviously, New York, Trump gets over 50%, more momentum, more talk about him getting it on the first ballot. Carol, what are your thoughts? Is this going to be a launching pad for those states we mentioned, Rhode Island, Pennsylvania, Maryland, for him really to continue this ascension to becoming the GOP nominee?
Well, I think that he's already had that momentum. Again, anytime that he's stumbled, it's been very, very, very short-lived. So I don't think that those states are all of a sudden going to go, oh, well, New York did this, so we're going to follow along. But I think that he does have this sort of way of capturing the attention of a large part of the American electorate. And I think that they're going to continue to propel him. I don't know if he's going to get the number, but I certainly think it's going to be very close. However, the challenge for him is if he doesn't get that number, for him to maintain and keep his delegates on ballot after ballot is going to be a challenge. And I never underestimate the ability of the GOP to do really stupid things and to do things that is going to basically anger a large number of Americans. So anything could happen if he doesn't get that number. It's incredibly critical for him.
Barrett, I want to switch gears, talk about the Democrats a little bit, because it was an interesting night in the Brooklyn for that debate. And I tell you, it got contentious at times. What were your thoughts of the overall tone? Do you think this will hurt as far as the unifying aspect once there is a nominee selected by the Democrats?
Yeah, I think overall the tone, it's getting down to the wire, and Bernie's throwing everything he's got to try to win New York. The frustrating thing is that Bernie and Hillary don't have that large of disagreement. They have issues about how they would implement similar ideologies, and that debate last night focused on these little disagreements they have about how they would implement raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, or foreign policy, or all these different issues. And I think we kind of focused more on their disagreements instead of what they have in common, and that's, that kind of chips away at each candidate and makes the Democratic base probably a little less excited about participating in our candidates, because we're making them not look as good as they could.
Carol, I don't know what you think, but I think Bernie Sanders had a good debate. I don't think it was enough really to change the landscape, to change the dynamic as far as what's going to happen Tuesday, and especially on the gun issue. I know that's so important for New York City voters especially. What was your take as far as what happened last night?
As I listened to your soundbite there and I watched the clip, all I could think of is I thought that dogfighting was illegal. It was absolutely impossible to watch and to listen to. I don't know which is worse. I call it sort of America's version of Sophie's Choice. And I think that the Democrats that I do know are really hoping that Hillary ends up indicted. They know that there's no way the party is going to support Bernie, and they're hoping that Biden or Bloomberg or somebody comes to the rescue at the last minute, because both of those candidates are just completely a desperate mess. And all the people who are Democrats really don't want to vote for either of them.
That was interesting. America's version of Sophie's Choice. I haven't had to write that down. Barrett, I want to ask you about that, because Jill Biden actually came out and in some ways kind of echoed that sentiment, talking about, the fact maybe America's missing out by not having her husband in the race. Do you think there is some remorse right now from Democrats that these are the two that we're left with?
Well, to a certain degree, yeah. I'd say, coming off President Obama, he was probably one of the greatest unifiers for the Democratic Party. So to come down from him to go to Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders, no one's going to live up to that. And Bill Clinton was also had a similar impact in the 90s. So the candidates the Democrats have available are just not going to be as exciting or energizing as what we've grown accustomed to, and that's going to always be a bit of a letdown. The key thing is just making sure that you continue to vote and participate to the similar levels. But yeah, without a doubt, people are going to start looking for someone who is more of a unifier, who just looks stronger, I guess, in all these different issues. And Bernie and Hillary just kind of seem to be picking at each other right now instead of, emphasizing their strengths.
Carol,
not just someone, anyone. They want anyone, like anybody but one of those two. It's just such a ridiculously awful choice. And I think that it's one of the things that bodes well for the Republicans, who aren't doing so well on their own either. But to the extent that either of those do get the nomination, there are a lot of people who are supporting the other candidate or who are supporting neither, who just aren't going to turn out and vote, or who are going to write in some other candidate.
All right, I got about 20 seconds left. Barrett, I'm going to get the last word. Bernie Sanders going to the Vatican. Smart decision to get off the campaign trail for a couple of days, or you think it's going to hurt him in New York?
I think it's going to be about a push on both ends. Like, frankly, he got invited to the Vatican. He's trying to play it up as much as he can, but the likelihood of him winning New York was already slim, so we'll see if it actually has an impact on it. But yeah, it's one of those things that just makes him look more international and better on foreign policy. So if they play it right, it could definitely be beneficial. All
right, really enjoyed the discussion today. Carol Roth and Barrett Holmes Pitner, thanks to both of you. And again, thanks so much for joining us right here on The Hard Line. After the break, the excess spending and biggest waste projects in government all revealed in this year's Pig Book. Leslie Page is going to join us to discuss next on The Hard Line.